morning. This is Fireside Chat number 4. And just to give you guys a little update, we are, shop is up and running at full capacity right now, getting orders out, and tech department is all back here in-house, and customer service is, as of today, all back here in the shop.
Yep.
And so anyway, we hope you guys are all doing well, and we'll give a second or two for some of you to start logging on, and we'll see what we can do to answer your questions. I've got a couple things I did want to address today after a few more of you get logged on. Just fun little bits of information. So, any questions yet to start, April?
Not yet. People are just logging in to say hi.
Everybody's saying hi. Well, hi from all of us here at the Featherweight Shop. I will tell you, so we've been doing these every other, well, no, not every other week, twice a month. So this month we're doing this on the 14th and then again on the 28th. But the 28th should be a lot of fun. We have a friend of mine who's another featherweight, what would you say, service featherweight fan, and deals in featherweights, but he also deals in a lot of the other vintage machines, and that's David Werther, and he is going to join us next week. Well, not join us in here, but he's going to join us on screen from his shop in Olympia, Washington. And so David's a great guy, and that'll be fun. I'll also give you guys a chance to ask some non-featherweight related questions as well. So looking forward to that. So that is coming up on the 28th of May, two Thursdays from today.
We have a first question.
First question coming in.
Okay, what would you suggest as a lining for a case we are refurbishing?
Lining for a case. I'm assuming that we're talking about an original featherweight case.
I think we have to repeat the question.
Yeah, the question is, what would we recommend to line a featherweight case? We should be most likely talking about the original cases, which a lot of you know and have seen. We've got blogs and everything on stinky original cases. The glue that was used for those cases was a horse glue, basically. And those natural enzymes cause bacteria and things to go crazy, and they can get some, what would you say, funky smells?
Yeah, pretty much.
So it's pretty common for those cases to be, the covering to be taken off and redone to some degree. Tolex is what's on the outside. But we do have a blog post that deals with different case restorations and things that people have used, because we've seen everything from decoupage to just some really beautiful cases, refinishing the wood.
Right.
I don't know actually what that it's kind of a plasticky feeling material that's on the inside of some of them, like on your tan case and stuff.
Oh yeah, like a vinyl type material.
Kind of a vinyl-y, yeah.
Tolex would probably suffice.
But you could use the Tolex on the inside as well, yeah. But the older cases, they had that the first generation, which Christian has the timeline that shows the different cases and things like that. The early ones that had that bluish green.
The green interior, yeah.
Was that? It's just a glued cloth type material.
Yeah.
And then on through the black cases, you had basic just cloth covering, and sometimes you have to cut that way. If you've seen us replace any of the latches on the case, you have to cut that fabric away and then re-glue some new black fabric on there. So, But there is that blog post. April, do you have that blog post up that you could link?
Okay, is this the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
So April will link or show you on screen or whatever that blog post that has what some of you have done, because
Right. There are some great ideas out there.
yeah,
A lot of fun restorations. It turns out really nice sometimes.
Yeah, April is definitely more the artistic one in the family compared to me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of her department, and there are some beautiful cases that you guys have redone, and she's put some of those in that blog post. And I guess they've got pulling that up now on the screen. So Featherweight case restoration ideas, and April, that blog post, to get there,
I typed in case restoration. In the
she just
shop.
typed case restoration in the search on the Featherweight Shop website, and it pulls up a blog post there under blogs and tutorials. So hope that answers your question and gives you some fun ideas of what to do. There is not a, what would you call it, Christian, like a standard that it has to be restored this way.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Next question.
I need to replace the spring on my featherweight table leg. I noticed you sell them. Can we get the screw for them too? And does it come with instructions?
Okay, the question is replacing the spring on the table, the featherweight card table, replacing the spring on the legs. Some of those springs are held on by a screw, and some are, I guess you would call it, pressed on. Only the screw ones can be replaced, but it's not a normal screw. I don't know that we have the screw on the website, but I know that is a screw that we can manufacture here. So that would be something you would want to talk to the tech department, and if we don't have a vintage original screw here to replace it with, I think we have the remanufactured ones.
So you can fade to the website to show the table leg
and then
spring.
so the table leg spring that we're talking about is that spring right there. The hole on the spring is what the screw goes through, and it is important that you put good springs on those tables, because if the leg collapses, then your machine hits the floor. It just wouldn't be a good thing. So those are good quality replacement springs.
Okay. Next question is, what kind of oil and grease do you recommend?
What kind of oil and grease do we recommend? Well, for starters, we recommend sewing machine oil, and sewing machine oil only. There's a slight caveat in that Tri-Flow is preferred by a lot of sewing machine guys. Tri-Flow is great in that it eats rust. Not rust. Varnish.
Yep.
Yeah. It eats varnish great. So if you got a machine that's just really stiff because it's sat for 20 years and that oil has turned to varnish, it looks like this brown goo on all the metal parts. You can use Tri-Flow on that, and it works great to eat that. And Tri-Flow, it's a good product. It has Teflon in it, so you want to be careful if you were to use it like on your long arms or anything like that have felt oiling wicks, because that Teflon can clog up the wick over time. But for the most part, for a featherweight, we just use regular sewing machine oil. We sell a couple different bottles here at the shop, but it's just normal sewing machine oil. For grease, we only recommend the Sew Retro grease, and I think you can probably see it on that top one here, the overhead. There you go. So this is our Sew Retro grease. We had this developed because there just was no low melting point grease on the market, and so there you go. Okay, so this has the proper melting point for the motor. See if I can show this in here. This is a featherweight motor that's cut away, and you can see the the lubrication port right there. It's got the felt wick down in there. And as this motor generates a little warmth, that low melting point grease will flow through that wick, and lubricates the shaft. Most modern lubricants and even sewing machine lubricants are now for your modern machines, and have a high melting point. So anyway, that's why we developed the So Retro grease, is because the original vintage Singer grease was no longer being made, which was a low melting point, non-flowing grease. And so anyway, that's what we recommend.
We have
Yes.
a video tutorial, and she was going to play it.
Yeah, so there's a video tutorial as well on the grease and the melting points and such. So.
Okay, next question is, I heard that you can do damage if you put grease in the machine. Is that true?
Grease in the machine.
The question is, can you damage the machine by putting grease in it? There are some greases that over time will somewhat solidify, and it can be a hassle to clean that old grease out. We haven't seen, I can't think of any machine where we've seen that the grease actually caused damage to the inside of the machine.
No, wouldn't be damage, but the grease, if the grease is put in the oiling points and solidifies in there, then it's gonna keep the oil from getting where it needs to go. So like on these two holes here on the back of this machine, let's see, can we go to that side view there? This is an oiling point right here, and there's another one down here. Can't see that one because it's behind the motor, but there's two there, and they oil the shaft, the main shaft that goes up and down in the machine. And so if you put grease in there and then it solidified, the oil would not get through there. So that would be a place where you wouldn't necessarily say the grease itself has done any damage,
right?
But it could keep, the regular servicing from doing what it's supposed to do.
Right.
Now, if you put if you put grease in the wrong parts of the motor, or the wrong grease in the motor, that can cause.
Right. The metal components of the machine are hardy. It's the electrical components in the motor that you'd want to worry about, as in like Vaseline, something that's going to get too liquefy too fast, or if you were to put grease in a new modern machine with a computer in it, plastic gears, it's not going to hold up against a petroleum-based grease.
Right. Yeah. So lots of tutorials. Grease is one of the most important things for your featherweight. So yeah, we've got a lot of tutorials on the website for that. So you can just type in So Retro grease or lubricant into the search bar, and you'll start pulling up the different blogs and videos.
She was told to grease it. She followed up with another question. She was told to grease it underneath. So
Okay.
on a black machine, yes. On a white machine, no.
Right. So she was told the question came back that she was told to grease it underneath the machine.
On a white featherweight, you would not want to put grease inside the machine. Again,
Right.
because there's a rubber belt in there. You wouldn't want grease on that. So it's not all metal components on the inside like the black and tan featherweights.
Yeah, so I'll just show you real quick on this machine. Take the bottom off of this one, the drip pan. There is only 2 gears that get grease. And let's see, so here you got the gears, and you put the grease on one gear, and then as you turn the hand wheel, it will transition that grease over to the other. And then the top of the machine, I'll flip it back this way, the top of the machine has gears up in here. And that's the 2 places that the machine get grease, plus the motor, and that's for your black and tan machines, but not for, like Christian said, not for your white. And then the motor gets grease, and again, lots of tutorials on those. Next question.
Okay. Let's go back up. Hold on. How hard is it to replace the light toggle on the featherweight?
Light toggle on the featherweight. The question
How hard
is
is
how
it
hard is
to
it?
replace?
We do have, and April can link that. There is a tutorial on replacing the electrical components on a featherweight. The light switch, the toggle switch, is not a difficult task to replace. Even if you haven't done it before, it's still probably no more than a 15-minute. Wouldn't you say? 15 minutes?
Yep.
Something like that. One of the things I was going to show you, often before we do a fireside chat, I ask, Burl and our tech department what questions have come in throughout the week on different things that we could answer questions for you guys. And so, as soon as April gets this pulled up, I'll show you one of the other ones that was a common question for this week.
So here's, I found the tutorial.
Okay, so the tutorial.
This is how to replace the electrical components.
How to replace the electrical components, and that's on there, and it shows the different the receptacle and the light switch and such. So, what Burl was wanting me to address today, and let's go to this overhead camera for just a second, Brooke. This is the light socket out of a featherweight. It has this lead tube that protects the wires, and by protect, what it does is you can bend it, push the wires so that they stay away from the gears, because if the gears got chewing into the wires, that wouldn't be a good thing. But we get a lot of questions as to when people go to replace a light bulb, their light now flickers and everything. And one of the reasons, one of the main reasons I've found, is that the light bulbs, in order to get more light, the original 15-watt bulb is replaced with a 20-watt bulb, and it basically gets hot, and it burns these pins that are inside the socket there. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm going to take this apart real quick. It's got 2 screws on the back, and I've already got one. Okay, here we go. I've already got one of the screws out, just so to make it a little faster. I'm using the small Vera screwdriver. Christian, you got any updates on the small Vera screwdriver?
No, I think their factories are still either pretty closed down or backed up right now.
So these are high quality German, from a German company, the Vera screwdrivers, and that small one is actually, we have specially made for us with this length of a shaft. And so it's on order, but they're telling us it could be June by the time they get here. So here is I've taken the back of the socket off, and I'll pull this apart, and then you can see those two, these are the 2 contact points. Can you pull that bulb out of that machine right there for a second, Christian? So you can see here on the bottom of the bulb, there's these 2 lead contact points, and they touch these 2 brass ones here. But look, I mean, I know it might be a little hard to see on the video, but the one contact point has its normal round end on it. The other one has just burnt through. I'll move that a little bit, hope you can see it. You can see that it's just burnt the end of that off, which has shortened it. And also what happens sometimes with the spring that is inside, these have a spring, so that when you push the bulb in and turn it, it presses up against these, and that's what makes contact. But that spring also will, or the heat from that higher wattage bulb will cause that spring to fuse, and they'll break. And so you go to replace your bulb, and now it won't make enough contact. Unfortunately, these things are like all pressed together, and so you really have to replace the whole socket in its entirety. But that is a common cause of a flickering or non-working bulb once you try to replace it.
Okay, next question is, is there a fix for when the thin strip of case lining that holds the bottom to the lid splits? You know that, the hinged
Right.
lining? So ask the question. You have to repeat.
The question is there a fix for when the lining from the lid of the case, the part that covers the, I guess where the hinges are on the inside. It's on the inside and where that seam is between the lid of the case and the bottom of the case. Sometimes that fabric will split right there. So the question is there a fix for that? Most of the time it's the hinges that are keeping the case lid from going down all the way. It's not that fabric. So if your lid does flop down all the way, it's like on a tan case, it's because the hinges have been pushed all the way back, torqued all the way back like that.
And that's really common, especially because the cases that have the foot controller in the lid, you've got this extra weight on the lid that flops open, and over time that wears. It's just normal fabric, like on a black one. So you could take black fabric and some craft glue and put a new piece on there. Wouldn't be anything wrong with that. It would cover it back up a little bit more like original.
Right.
Okay, this is like refreshing way differently than it has before, so I've got to, hold on just a moment.
April's trying to find questions as they refresh. Hey Christian, why don't you show us this beautiful machine over here? I'm being facetious, just so you know.
Over here in front of me I have an Alpha Sew sewing machine. I'm not even going to call it a Featherweight. It's a Featherweight clone. Made by Alpha Sew. It looks, from a distance, it looks very, very similar, but it's not near the same quality as a regular Featherweight. Some of the components are plastic.
Like the drip pan on the bottom is this piece here. That's just plastic.
And it's not.
I mean, that's not really actually a big deal.
Right.
But it's not made to the same standards by any stretch.
Right. So if you're looking for a Featherweight, make sure that it is actually a Singer Featherweight, or you will likely be disappointed by the quality.
Yeah, so if you look here, let's see. Brooke, let's go to the overhead camera here, see if I can get this in here. See there, we've got the Alpha Sew Manufacturing Company. It looks, a lot of it looks similar. It's just missing the Singer, but it's really the, what would you say, the quality of the
tolerances,
the quality of the manufacturing, which is really where the problems come in. This, as far as the Alpha Sew, it has one good characteristic in my mind, and that is the replacement motor is actually a fairly strong and decent motor. And until we started rewinding motors, it was about the only option if your motor was dying on your Featherweight. That or try to find another original one that you could replace it with. So many of the parts that you find like on eBay and such for a Featherweight, if they're new parts, they're actually parts that were created for this Alpha Sew. And because the thread pitch is not the same, things like that, you can actually do a lot of damage to your machine by using these replacement parts that aren't exactly the right pitch, the right tolerance. It's most of the reproduction hook assemblies that you see out there were made like that for this. They look really close, but close is not close enough.
Yep.
When you're trying to restore. So I would stay away from. I actually got that machine. That Alpha Sew was a gift to me by Dave McCallum when he retired. And one of Dave's stipulations was, he said, I'll give you this Alpha Sew if you promise to only teach with it and never give it to some poor soul, because it's just it's not a good machine.
Okay, question is, do you have a storefront or is it strictly a website order?
Question is, do we have a storefront or is it strictly a website store, right, Mom? Okay. We don't have a storefront here at the shop. We're 7-8 miles out of town, and out of a town of just 600 people. So we don't get a lot of foot traffic. In the summer, people stop by to say hi, maybe pick up an order, and we have fun Featherweight things to see, but it's not set up like a store.
Yeah, we have like a little, as you come into the building, there's a a lot of our, because Christian's the historian and he collects all the fun stuff. This is his machine here that he purchased. And so this is one that's out there in the front room. So we love guests, and you're always welcome to call us and make sure that there's someone here and you can stop by. But not a storefront like to do shopping, but like Christian said, love to have guests. You can always stop by to pick up an order or drop off a machine or anything like that.
Okay, back to the featherweight tables. Do you know what finish was originally on the featherweight tables? The wood ones, the black edge, metal legs with screw-on springs. If the top is really messed up, do you have a recommended method to refinish it? I know you have touch-up paint for the white and tan, so maybe you have something for the tables.
Okay, so the question is about the featherweight table, the card table. It's got the little insert in there. What was the finish on it? There's a couple different styles. There's one with the brown legs and brown metal around the outside of it. There's also one with black around the tabletop itself with black metal legs. There's one with black wood legs. The top itself, I believe it's a walnut finish. I don't remember what the actual wood is because it's a veneer. The veneer is very thin. Ask me how I know how thin it is. If you start sanding and you sand too much, you're going to go through the veneer and now you've destroyed it. So we usually recommend, and like for our tables and stuff, something like Howard's Restore Finish. Wipe that on there, and they look really great. I have painstakingly refinished some tables with extensions, and they were just absolutely beautiful. But just be careful of the thickness of the veneer. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that that answers your questions. The tables are a lot of fun. I will tell you, the first featherweight table I bought at a yard sale. I had to convince the lady to take her cash register off of it in order to let me buy the table. I don't know if the table was actually for sale. It was what they were using as part of the yard sale. So be careful when you're out there and you see little tables. Actually, another fun fact, Christian and I were on a road trip one time and we were in the hotel watching a movie. I can't say I recommend the movie. I don't even really remember much about the movie, but it was some movie with Denzel Washington, kind of a end of the world type of a thing.
Yeah.
And we were watching this, and they were in this room, and I said, Christian, that's a featherweight table. And so sure enough, we went and did some YouTube searches and paused it on there, and you could see the cutout. And so even in a movie prop, something that was supposed to be end of world type nuclear disaster thing, they had a featherweight table. It was pretty cool. So be looking at yard sales, thrift stores, and even on the movies.
Okay, so the question is, how do you oil the locking mechanism on the case?
Oh, that's a good question. Oiling the locking mechanism on the case. A lot of times, oil is not the issue. I think what I'll do is I will go grab a case and some oil so we can see what we're talking about. Christian can maybe tell you a little bit while I'm gone about this machine here.
Sounds good.
This machine was also featured on this morning's newsletter.
Oh, okay.
And
So on my right, I've got a 1939 wrinkle finish featherweight. The wrinkle featherweights were from 1939 and 1940. The 1939 ones are characterized by the wrinkle faceplate on the front as well. And there's no decals on the bed of the machine. It's just 3 grooves. Right here, just 3 grooves up and down. And same thing with the faceplate. There's not really a known reason why Singer produced the featherweight with a wrinkle finish. There's a lot of speculation, mystery about maybe it was for the war, something like that. But the featherweight, Singer made other machines with that wrinkle finish as well. that were far more common. It's not even, wouldn't even be considered rare. And there were other brands that did the same type of finish as well. So maybe they were experimenting with it on the featherweight, but because they only did so few, it makes it pretty rare and valuable.
Yeah. Let me plug back in here. So I've grabbed a case here. The question was how to oil the latches on the case. That's a good question. But for starters, we should say that oil's usually not the fix-all to these not working properly. What happens is this button right here sticks out, and as this thing gets bumped against walls or whatever, it sometimes gets dented in, pressed in.
Yeah.
And so what's actually happening is it's like it's stuck from friction, not a lack of oil. But we still do oil these, and what we do is stand it up on end like such, and then put a drop of oil right where, so you can see here. Let me move this out here. Let's maybe go, yeah, let's go to the overhead camera. There we go. So with it up on end like this, I put a drop of oil right, get it to come out right there, and then it just works its way down into the latch itself. I'd let it sit for 10 minutes, flip the case over, and then do it again on the other one, letting gravity just do its work. But the thing to be careful of is if it doesn't work and that button has been somewhat smashed up against the case, that button is pressed on, and if you stick a screwdriver underneath there and start prying on it, there's a good chance you're going to pop that button all the way off. So I would first try doing some oil and hope for that works. But if it requires you to move that button manually with your finger, I would probably continue to do that as opposed to prying on it, trying to fix it that way, because you're going to go to destroying it completely.
You'll be opening up the latch with a screwdriver every time.
Yeah. So it's a good chance when you do it with a screwdriver, you're going to have to replace the whole thing, and that's not a super easy or fun task.
Okay, this thing keeps switching. What wattage of bulb do you get in the 2-to-1 tune-up kit?
What wattage of bulb is in the tune-up kit? Well, the tune-up kit has an LED bulb in it, and I believe they're 4 watts because they're LED. They hardly use any power at all. It has 80 little LED light-emitting diodes on there. A higher number of diodes does not mean brighter, because it matters the size of the diode. That's why, like if you get a shop light now from like Home Depot, you can get some of them that are really, really bright, and they just have this one gigantic LED in there. So these have 80, and they're actually quite a bit brighter than some that had all the way up to 150. And over the years, we've carried different ones based on brightness. But I mean, if you've never had the opportunity to use an LED bulb, they're great because they don't burn you like the incandescent ones do. And they're brighter.
Okay, do you sell a tool set specifically for the featherweight? I have the small, medium, and large screwdrivers, looking for something for small screws on plate near foot. You give a tutorial on how to use them.
Okay, so the question is, do we sell a tool kit just for the featherweight? I don't see, we don't have a long screwdriver out. Actually, April, would you grab me? There's a long screwdriver right there and a safety. So these are the 4 main screwdrivers that we carry. And the 2 screws by the needle plate here are actually easiest to access with the long, and you're able to get them from up above. And that's one of the things I like about it, is because you can get it from up above. There's still, the screwdriver's so long that you can keep the angle up and down to where you're not damaging the screw or anything. And if you haven't watched any of our tutorials on the Vera screwdrivers and why we use these specifically, exclusively, you should watch that, because we have tutorials on each and every screwdriver and why we use each one.
Mm-hmm. And what each one, which screws each one does as well.
Right. Christian has gone through showing each screw and which screwdriver to use with each screw. Yeah. So, good question. Yep.
Okay. Okay, let's see if I can get this to give you another question here. It's kind of weird. I want to convert my 222 featherweight motor to 110, and she wants to know what else she needs to do, like if there was a power cord or...
Okay. Christian?
Yeah, the question is, or the request is, she wants to convert her featherweight from 220 volt to 110.
And 220 would have come where?
220 would have come Australia, the UK, Europe, and pretty much every other country you're going to have it, except Canada or North America, and then sometimes smaller numbers.
While
but anyways,
where France did both. But anyway, so if she's got one that somebody's given her from, Great Britain or something.
Right. It's going to have a 220 volt motor on there most likely. The controllers are universal, and the wires inside the machine are universal. The motor is going to need either rewound or replaced, and then the plug that goes into the wall is going to need replaced, because we have different outlet styles here in the US. The only other thing that would need changed would be the light bulb, because the light bulb, those are specific to the voltage that's coming into the machine. If you're using a converter, that's another option. You can use a converter. You don't have to change the...
You can buy one off of Amazon.
Right. It's the most inexpensive way to get your 220 volt featherweight working here in the US, is just to use a converter. You use that converter, you still want to have the same voltage bulb that matches the motor that you're using, because if you have 110 power coming into the converter, you still have 220 power coming out. So you still would want a 220 bulb, but if you changed out the motor, the plug, and then the light bulb to a 110, you'd be good to go.
Yeah. So hopefully that answers all your questions.
That's not fine. That's fine. Any more recommendations for loosening the spool pin cover screw on the 221? It was half stripped when I got it, and I put trifle on it for 5 days, hair dryer, hollow ground. I had one drop of 3 and one was a last resort.
Okay.
Yeah.
The question is how to loosen the spool pin cover plate screw if it's stripped or stuck. Here we go. We got it on this screen here. This is the screw she's talking about right there. And if this one's really loose, but if it was too tight, stripped, and you couldn't get that screw loose, what you can do is you'd want to if it had a spring on it, you'd want to take the spool pin spring off, but you can pull up on the pin and sort of push up with your thumb on the side of the plate right here. And you can pull up on the pin and push up with your thumb and push at the same time, pull and push towards the back. That will rotate that screw counterclockwise and initiate that loosening process.
So it's actually, when we learned that trick, it took all the frustration away, because we used to fight with that screw all the time, and really all you have to do is push this to the back. Now, I've got another one here that I just took off of this other machine sitting beside me here, and you'll see that little tiny, little divot notch type thing right there where my finger is. It's hard to see. Let's go over to this camera over here. Yeah, that little thing right there. That actually goes in, let's go back to this overhead one right here. And it goes in that little spot. Let's go back to this overhead. and move this right there. There's a little notch, and so that little thing that sticks out goes in that notch. So you don't have to pick it up very far. You're not actually torquing or doing any damage to the machine, but that rotating on a tight screw, I don't know that I've ever seen it not work and start to unloosen or loosen that.
Let's see. One lady has an attachment that scratched her machine, and she wants to know what she can do to improve it. Let's see. Scratched my featherweight, which was in beautiful condition. Can I tell if I just rub over the finish will be enough to restore it? Can you describe what kind of protective measures I can take to protect the finish further? Carnauba wax. I'm a new owner.
Okay. The question or the problem is that the machine was scratched by an attachment, the bed of the machine, the painted surface, it sounds like. Unfortunately, there's not much that can be done for a deep scratch in the way of without repainting.
Right, yeah. You can protect to keep it from getting worse. And by protect, I mean get a good coat of wax on it. We use the Zymol cleaner and wax. And so, and, you know, I've seen people try to fine paint, fill that in. But it's difficult to do, you know.
Sometimes it's not going to look better.
Yes, I often say, you know, it's a love mark. It's a mark that the machine was actually used. But your choices with that are really, when you get all the way down through the black, your choices for the most part are living with it, protecting it from getting worse, or repainting. And we have done, Dave McCallum used to very painstakingly, he showed how to fill a chip and things like that, and we even do that in some of our classes and stuff. But for the most part, it's I don't know, it's hard. It's personal preference, I guess.
I have no internet problem.
Oh.
I don't know what you do.
Yeah, so we'll go back to any other questions. As I mentioned last time we were live, you know, we try to look at questions that come in throughout the last 2 weeks, so that we're answering something that's new. So if you have questions that you need for the tech department, chances are you might hear that same question answered next week on the live video. So.
Do you have replacement feed dogs for the 222?
Replacement feed dogs for the 222. That's the question, is do we carry those? That's one of those specialty items that you're going to need to call and talk to the tech department. One of the main reasons that because there is not a reproduction replacement that's specifically for that, so usually those come off of some other parted out machine, and most people, because of the limited supply of 222s, most people will try to restore and protect, and fortunately they're not getting parted out. So,
Right.
But call, because occasionally we get a machine that's, you know, it's been through a flood and it's completely rusted out or locked up or whatever, and so we might have that available.
Okay. Is there drag on because the wrinkle finish featherweight is not smooth? Is there any drag on the fabric?
That's a good question. The question is there drag on the fabric on a wrinkle finish featherweight? Not a significant amount. It's not going to be the same as a high glossed waxed machine, but it's not something where you would feel drag.
Right.
The truth is, this machine here, is because of its rarity and everything. It's going to get used on special occasions, but for the most part, it's part of a collection that's probably not going to see a whole lot more use, like I said, except for special times.
Right. The feed dogs are gripping the fabric well enough that regular sewing, you'd never notice a difference. If you maybe picked up the foot and turned the fabric, it might not be so smooth, but
you could possibly feel
it wouldn't be.
If you were doing free motion work with the embroidery and darning foot on there, and you're, doing a crazy quilting or something like that, you could possibly feel it. But no, it's just a neat.
Don't let that keep you from buying one.
Yes.
Two key questions. One is, can a key for my case be replaced? And the next related to it is, my green and white case does not use a key. Most I see do. What's the difference?
The first question is, if I lose the key from my featherweight case, can it be replaced? The answer is yes. All of the same type of latches took the same type of key. So if you have a standard 221 case latch, it's going to take the same key as your friends. If a 222 Great Britain or one of the cases manufactured for the machines in the UK have a different latch system, that's going to take a different key, but the same key for each of that same style. Same thing with the early 33, 34 cases.
Has that
same
cool
key, but only for that latch style.
Yeah, that cool little brass looking.
Yeah, those real small ones. The white featherweight cases took, some had keys. The Canadian ones, the blue vinyl cases, those had keys. Those are unique. Some of the green ones did have keys. The ones with the fabric covering on the case did have a locking mechanism on the latch, and then the ones with the paper covering, the rubber molded handle, the one that doesn't have the pins, that one has just a regular latch with no keyhole. So that one wouldn't take a key, but those cases hold up a little bit better than the ones that are fabric material. So I don't know, it's not a big deal. And like I said, it's the same key for each style of latch, so it's not the most secure.
And we do have replacements for. They're not always in stock,
right.
So
depends on how rare they are.
it just depends on which one. If it's for that early 33, those are few and far between to find.
There is a concise history.
Oh yes, I did do a blog post on the concise history of the featherweight case. And down there a little ways, probably almost to the bottom,
Okay, go to the bottom.
is several of the keys. You can see the different styles. That would probably be fun to look at.
I'm getting there.
Cases
There
are
we are.
fun. Yeah, there's
There's
your
the
keys.
33, 34 brass key on the, is that the left side?
Yeah.
I can't tell. Yeah, that would be the left side. The standard 221 case is next. The 222 Great Britain case key is in the center. Next up, that sort of diamond-shaped key, fourth over, that's the that green and white fabric-covered white featherweight case, and then that one on the far right is a key for the blue Canadian vinyl cases. And there are a few others, but I guess that's all I had at that point in time.
And Christian will give you a test later.
Yeah, right.
I can't. I have to go look at each one. I can't remember that all off the top of my head, but it's what it's like to be young, I guess.
Why are some featherweights sewing fast and some sluggish?
The question is, why are some featherweights sewing fast and some not so fast? There are quite a few things that can slow a featherweight down. And I'll give a few easy things to check. Make sure that the bobbin winder's up when you're sewing.
Yeah.
That's going to cause resistance.
If it's down on the belt, yeah, that's slow down.
Make sure the belt's properly adjusted. Make sure that the belt is not too stiff. If you have a weak motor, loose belt or a flexible belt is going to help improve speed, like the super belt. It's far more flexible than the previous replacement, so that's going to pick up speed for sure. If the machine hasn't been oiled, it's pretty dry on the inside.
Varnish, yeah.
Yeah, or too much oil and it varnishes up, that's going to cause the machine to be tight. A thread jam, thread behind the hook assembly, that can slow the machine down. Thread behind the motor pulley, thread behind the hand wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bunch. Unfortunately, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to why a machine is slow.
One thing that you can do to isolate is take the belt off the hand wheel and turn the hand wheel. If the machine is stiff, then you know that the machine is making the motor work hard. If the machine just without the belt and you just turn the hand wheel and it's really loose, then you know that either the motor's stiff or that the motor itself is weak, or foot controller could be out of adjustment, but that's unlikely.
Yeah, and so once you take that belt off and you turn it, if it is stiff, well, that tells you that it's the machine causing the problem. If you'll take the needle plate off next, then that will isolate whether the stiffness is coming from the hook assembly or it's someplace in the machine itself. And so there's a little process that you go through to isolate where that issue might be.
Yep.
Okay, next question. What would happen if I accidentally use a 110 bulb in a 220 or on a 220 with a 110? And how can I find out which one is which?
If you put a 110 bulb, the question is, what if I put the wrong voltage bulb in my machine? If you put a 110 bulb in a 220 machine, if you've got 220 power coming into that machine, it's going to blow the bulb.
Fireworks.
Yeah. It's
just going to spark. It's like your old camera flash bulb.
Yeah.
It'll be out.
It's too high voltage for the bulb. If you put a 220 bulb in a 110 machine, it's going to be really dim. Sometimes it barely even lights up at all.
Because it only has half the power going to how it was designed.
Right.
And
Yeah.
how do you tell if it's a 110 or 220? Are they marked?
They are not, actually.
Most of the time, the bulbs are not marked.
We mark them when they come to us, so we know we're sending out the right one, but on the bulb itself, there isn't a marking.
Unfortunately, if you put the wrong one in there, you're not going to do any damage to you shouldn't do any damage to anything other than the bulb.
Mm-hmm.
So if the bulb blows, whoops, it was the wrong bulb. If it's dim, it's the wrong bulb, but you're not going to harm the machine itself.
Okay, we have 5 more minutes left.
Five minutes left. We'll see if we can get a couple quick answers in here.
Will pin needles, scratches come out, and will Zymol help?
Good question. Yeah, the question is, will pin scratches come out, and will the Zymol help with those pin scratches? Scratches, a lot of that depends on how deep the scratch is. If it's just surface, sometimes you can really polish up a machine and everything's glossy and you don't notice them as well. Mm-hmm. The only way to actually get a scratch out is to do something with grit that would basically buff that scratch out. And just like when we were talking about refinishing the top of a featherweight table, you always run that risk of going too deep because that clear coat is so thin. So if you use turtle wax makes a rubbing compound and a polishing compound. If you use the red stuff, which is the rubbing compound, it's for deep scratches. And you start in there. I've done it. I've tried back in the day, and all of a sudden I've gone through all the clear coat, and now you've got this big dull spot, and I would have been better off leaving the pin scratch. So the Zymol is going to help brighten everything up, but it's not a scratch remover.
No, it can help because the wax is going to get in that scratch, so it's going to
lessen the appearance.
Yeah, it's going to make the surface more level, because when you polish out a scratch, it's not like you're necessarily removing the scratch, you're just leveling everything else. So the Zymol sort of does this same thing, but by going up instead of down, but it doesn't take the scratch away.
Yeah.
Is there a tool or hint to fix the thread plate hole? It looks like broken needles have gouged the hole, leaving a burr.
Oh, okay. So the question is there a trick or a tool to fix the needle hole? When it's got all these gouges and stuff all around it, most of that comes from getting too aggressive with moving the fabric as you're sewing. The feed dogs are what's supposed to be moving the fabric, not your arms, because if you're moving it, you're not going to have a consistent stitch because it's not being moved at this systematic way that the feed dogs are. So let the feed dogs do the work, because when you start moving it yourself, you're pulling the needle out of position and you're pulling it onto the side of the throat plate and the hole where the needle goes through. And it's pretty common for it to get gouged. And then when there's gouges in there, those gouges can cut the thread.
Yeah.
And you get thread that breaks, randomly and annoyingly. There is some fine honing rope, basically, that we use to polish those out. The issue is, in order for the stitch to form correctly, that hole needs to be a certain size. So you can't just take like a drill bit and drill it out bigger, because then as the fabric's coming back up with the needle into it, it's going to be pulling the fabric up into that hole, and you could get skip stitches or funky looking stitches and stuff. So we do that. You'd want to call and talk to the tech department, because I don't know that that's anything that we have on the website for sale.
Right.
So they're saying that we're out of thread jam tools? I thought we were back in stock.
Thread jam tools, one of the components of the thread jam tool we are waiting on, and I believe it's supposed to be here on Tuesday. And so the tools are basically made, and we've got a system down to where we really shouldn't be running out of thread jam tools anymore. But that's just a matter of, there's so much stuff right now in the world that it's hard to get supplies on. Christian was going to put some plexiglass in a picture frame that he had up at the house. Well, plexiglass is almost impossible to get because it's being put everywhere at the bank and the grocery store and everything. And so there's some things that are just harder to get. So one of the rods for that thread jam tool is back ordered for a few days. But make sure you sign up for the in-stock notification and you'll get notified. And then fortunately we are at that point now to where the system is, we're turning out enough of them that we shouldn't be running out regularly like when it was first introduced.
Is there anything I can do? This is the last question.
Last question.
Is there anything I can do to adjust the table bed on my 221 red badge so it lays flat? I put a straight edge across it, and my 221 1940 lays much flatter than the 221 red badge table.
Okay, that's a good question. The question is, on this particular machine is a Red S221K. The bed of the machine does not lay completely flat. It's not level across the this whole area right here. It sticks up just a little bit. This is fairly common, especially with the machines in Great Britain. The molding right here on this edge is often a little bit more thick than other machines. So when that bed comes down, it's going to stop about like that.
So it's one of those, what would you say, Christian? It's one of those personal preferences. Do you want to keep it as original as possible, or do you want to fix it? Because the fix is to file a little bit right there, so that when it comes down and hits, that it drops down a little bit further. But it's not. Then you've got to do some touch-up paint because you filed there and everything. So it's a personal preference. I have seen some that are like, how did it ever make it out of the factory that far off?
Yeah.
Because some are quite extreme. But yeah.
There is one last question, just because it's relevant to the wrinkle. How do you
Okay.
clean a wrinkle finish featherweight?
Oh, yeah. How do you clean a wrinkle finish featherweight? Well, we've got it here. The wrinkle featherweight we clean with sewing machine oil. I know there's a lot of people that recommend cleaning the featherweight with sewing machine oil. We don't clean any of the black painted gloss featherweights with sewing machine oil. But a wrinkle finish, we do. We just
with the toothbrush.
yeah, we put some sewing machine oil just sparingly on the surface, rub it in with the toothbrush, and then wipe it off the paper towel. It's far more and far less likely for like it doesn't have a clear coat on it, so
Right.
it's not near as temperamental.
Yes, that's temperamental is a good thing because, putting sewing machine oil on this, yes, you can actually get gunk and stuff like that, the sewing machine oil to get that off there. So it's not that we don't do it on these machines, but mainly because of what it has the potential to do to the clear coat. Whereas, if you had some gunk on here and you did sewing machine oil on a toothbrush, you don't have to worry about the clear coat. And they do clean up really nice. Yeah. Okay, I think we are good. So remember, 2 weeks from now, that is May 28th, we'll have our next Fireside Chat. And David Werther from Quilters Connection is going to join us via Zoom or something like that, to where you can talk to both of us and get those questions answered. We have another tutorial coming out we did one earlier on presser foot pressure that came out. And now, I believe next Tuesday, we'll have a new one coming out with presser foot height adjustment. So, yeah, so if you're joining us for the first time, you just stumbled across our Fireside Chat, make sure you sign up for the in-stock. Sign up for the newsletter, because the newsletter always has when
The
Fireside
schedule.
Chat, the schedule. So whether it's Fireside Chat or the Mother's Day sale that we just had, things like that. So anyway, yeah, it's been a fun day. Hopefully we answered some of your questions, and we'll see you here in 2 weeks.